Kathy and Bobby Roberts lost their son Trent 5 years ago. A bus carrying members of a North Carolina church slammed into the SUV Trent was riding in. An investigation revealed a defective tire on the bus caused the crash. In their heartache of losing a son, the Roberts learned Trent's death came at a price they don't want you to have to face.
Tackled everything with a smile, and everybody tells you that.
Trent Roberts had lots of reasons to smile. The 24-year-old's life was filled with friends, hobbies, and working his way up in the family business. But on October 2nd, 2013, it ended. He was heading back home to Knoxville from a fishing trip in South Carolina. A church bus traveling in the opposite direction on I-40 in Jefferson County blew a tire. It collided with the SUV Trent was riding in. He was thrown from the vehicle and died instantly.
Every day when we get up, we feel like our reward is knowing that we're going to join Trent in heaven someday through the blood of Jesus. That is our reward.
The Roberts and members of the North Carolina church filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the maker of the defective bus tire. During the legal battle, the Roberts learned a law in Tennessee caps the amount of money a jury can award for non-economic damages. That cap, $750,000.
We feel like that cap needs to be amended.
The Roberts argument, the amount of money that is awarded in a wrongful death case should not be dictated by a law, but rather a jury that hears the evidence and testimony. Knoxville defense attorney Don Bosch says the Tennessee cap was put in place for a reason.
The insurance industry is trying to prevent catastrophic type verdicts, even if warranted, and so they have been able to pass this kind of legislation.
If the accident had happened just a few miles across the line in North Carolina, there would not have been a limit on the caps.
Tennessee is among a handful of states that cap non-economic damages. In recent years, a number of states have overturned their caps after a court ruled them unconstitutional.
This is the kind of case that likely would wind up before the Tennessee Supreme Court if someone were able to rule it unconstitutional, or if even lower courts ruled the cap constitutional. And I think there is some chance it could get reversed, even with a business-friendly Supreme Court like we have in Tennessee right now.
After a legal fight that stretched into 5 years, the Roberts settled for the Tennessee cap of $750,000. But for them, it isn't over.
We're not against the intent of the cap. We understand why the cap is there, and we support the reasoning the cap is there. But there ought to be some balance.
We also feel an obligation to see if Tennessee lawmakers can come alongside us to help amend this law.
To that end, this mother and father are willing to recount the stories of their son's life and tragic death, and their heartache and hope.
This is for Trent. Trent's gained his reward in heaven.
And the Roberts have met with some lawmakers here in Tennessee, and just last week sat down with Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. Of course, we will keep you posted on their efforts. John.
Robin, thank you. We're joined by Chief Meteorologist